Hi, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to Barely Conscious and Streaming. I am so excited to introduce you to my friends, Jamie, Christopher, and Monica. I'm Aubria Ralph at Scrappy Go Project. I'm the CEO and founder, lead consultant. And I'm just going to let Christopher start introducing himself and pass the baton.
I'm Christopher Foderingham-Garraway. I'm an attorney. I work for the Unified Court System in New York as a principal law clerk to a judge. I work in the appellate division, so that means that I primarily review appeals that come to the second department, which is by far the largest surface area of the New York State. I quite enjoy it. I previously was qualified to practice law in the Caribbean, and I'm happy to be here to share with you guys. Jimmy?
Hi, I'm Jamie. I work at an insurance company where I'm in their subrogation department, and I basically negotiate and talk with other insurance companies about property damage claims and things of that nature. And yeah, Melanie, yeah.
Hi everyone, my name is Monica. Nice to meet
Monica, sorry, Monica.
you. That's all good. I recently joined New Jersey Department of Health. I am part of their legal team there, so I consider myself basically like in-house counsel. So kind of managing all sorts of projects, from contracts to just figuring out how to make the citizens of New Jersey have a healthier and safer day-to-day life.
Okay, thank you guys. And it's so funny because none of you gave a shout out to our alma mater. What's up with that? So so we're all graduates of Brooklyn Law School. And I actually should probably say what I used to do before I started my company. I worked at two big law firms as a debt finance attorney, specializing in special situations, fund financing, and acquisition finance, but I could pretty much do anything. And so we're just going to talk about what our experiences were, after graduating in 2019 and 2020. Those 2 years are kind of hot years for different reasons. Let's get started. So, Monica, I'm going to start with you. Like, what was it like graduating in the middle of the pandemic?
It was insane. 1 week you were in school, and then the next week you were told that all your classes are online and that you were to be fully remote. So it was definitely a very interesting experience, unique, I would say. Um, and it just ended law school very abruptly. So you didn't have that normal closure that, with your classmates and professors that you normally would do. But I did enjoy the end of, or the beginning of COVID, but the end of my law school semester by being able to just simply focus on my classes. You were, stuck at home, so you had nothing else to do but study. So I would say that was, it worked out for me. So yeah, that was my.
Yeah, no, and Chris, you were already working as a clerk, right? When during that. So like what was that like, going like fully remote in the court system?
It's kind of interesting because I had just kind of onboarded with the trial court. I was in Brooklyn, Supreme.
Mm-hmm.
And what was interesting about it was that if you know trial courts, especially Supreme Court in New York City, they're very high touch, like easily like a couple hundred people in the door every day. And so let's say that there were rumors that this was going to happen, and there were people who in the court who weren't too like concerned about it, but other people were. So it was just like, will it or won't it, right? And governor's order came out in the middle of the week. So I was there the day before, and then the next day it was just like, no, don't come in. All right. And I was like, all right, cool. But then we were essential, so we ended up coming in anyway. And I just really recall just how, like, I always talk about this. I have like a video I sent someone at the time when I was commuting in during the lockdown period, where Atlantic Park Place training center is quite a large like subway station, and the lines for the 3, 4, and the 2, 3, sorry, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4, and 5, which are basically center of the station. They easily a couple hundred people every day at rush hour. I was
Mm-hmm.
the only person on all four platforms.
Oh wow.
Like I was the only person that got on the train station, on the train to get further downtown. And it was like kind of crazy because it's just like, this is not I Am Legend, you know what I mean? But yeah, like it was
Maybe it was, bro. They just didn't give you the memo. You out there in the streets.
like
um
fully suited for no one to see.
yeah, no, I mean it's so crazy, right? Like I remember, so I had a weird like graduation situation because I was part of that 2-year program. Monica was also, she was a year behind me, but she was also part of the 2-year program at Brooklyn, because we're so smart. Um but I digress. And so, so although I graduated in 2019 with Chris, I ended up doing a summer associate program at a big law firm after graduation, which was like super crazy. So like I graduated the Friday and I started the summer program the Monday. So like this was
Right.
this is how rushed my life was. And then I ended up having to get like surgery after I did that. Like I ended up getting surgery that I had delayed while I was in law school. Um because like I just had like, you guys know the story. Like I was hit by a car. It was like a huge deal. But they ended up finding a mass that they had to remove. And so I had to delay that 18 months. And so I delayed start for my career
To deal with medical, right?
to deal with medical stuff. And so it like ended up being just like a really, like when I look back at it, like just like a really like crazy time for me. And so when the pandemic hit, I was still teaching at the time. And
Oh,
yeah, I was still teaching through all of that. And I remember actually one of my students, looking back, I ended up getting COVID in like February 2020, and I had no idea I had COVID. But ultimately I remember getting a delayed, like it was funny because I was like an early start for like the summer program group that I was with, but I was supposed to start in April and it was delayed until June because of like all of the pandemic stuff too. And so I know like even the people that were during, who were supposed to start that fall, they were delayed almost 8 months, to kind of
right.
start as well.
Some people got paid out, right? Like I remember some people got paid out to kick down to see if, like,
Yeah.
because they didn't know what was gonna happen. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Like, like some people, like some firms I know like outright paid people, but like other firms, they did kind of like stipends. So like you had to like pay that back later. And then they also like covered, health insurance. So it was a wild time. But Jamie, you and I were studying for the bar that October. Like, remember how crazy that was? Like talk about what it was like finding out that like you're not gonna be in person for an exam, and
No,
and
it was
how you like manage, like how you even manage to like what were some of like your study techniques, like what did you do? um
I studied you using. I got like a course, a bar course. I remember.
mhm,
I think I feel like it was Barbary maybe, or maybe
mhm.
I don't remember which one, or maybe I tried a couple of them honestly. um,
But
and I just followed the course, which was pretty, as you guys remember. I think you could like set it to how quickly you wanted to accomplish it. And then you'd have like tasks every day, and
mhm.
it was during the pandemic, so it was pretty boring and isolating. But better than probably, well, not actually. I don't know. Like better than a lot of things because you're just studying.
Yeah, but like, so how did you deal with like the isolation? I'm hearing some background noise from somebody. I don't know who it is, but it's like distracting me. So can you guys like can you just like check or like put, like if you're using a device, like put other stuff on mute. Um, but ultimately, like, I know when I was studying, like, I liked the isolation because I feel like
Yeah.
I remember studying in law school, like, there was always somebody interrupting you in the
Mhm.
library. Somebody always coming to, "Oh, hey, how you doing? Oh, you want coffee? Oh, here's some,
Yeah.
here's some chicken wings. Oh, here's a bat, like, here's a chocolate," like, basically anything to distract you,
Mhm.
like, "Oh, we're going, there's happy hour over here," you name it, there was always some kind of distraction going on. I feel like,
Mhm.
whenever I was studying during finals. And so for me, like, I really enjoyed the isolation because I felt like it gave me time to kind of focus on myself and really just like zero in and do like the thing
Mhm.
that mattered to me.
Yeah.
But like Chris, you have like a whole wife and kids. So like what was the vibes, man?
Mhm.
Well, I don't know, like uh, for studying at the time in school and after, it was interesting
Mhm.
because there were two things I really had. One was that I worked at the library, so I kind of understood the cadence of student flow very well,
Mhm.
and I was able to like work around people. But also, I used to kind of hide. Like I would have like these random spots that only if you knew. Like there was a secret kind of wasn't a secret, but like overlooked corner room that overlooked the courtyard that I would frequently be in. I also was
Mhm.
like a real fan of like the basement because they had some rooms with whiteboards, and I'm like a
Mhm.
whiteboard fanatic.
Mhm.
Yeah, so
We
like
know, Chris. We know.
yeah, diagram guy right here. Like 'cause, just, like you're very good logarithmic notes, but I like to have like I don't know, like a kind of spread out
Mhm.
scene, and that was very helpful. And funnily enough, instead of like taking public transit, I would sometimes walk home. So it'd give me like a 3 mile, 4 mile walk.
Mm.
And so it was time to cool off my head to come home and
Mhm.
like recharge into whatever was going on at home.
Mm.
Probably wasn't the greatest because it took a while, but it did help. You know what I mean?
I did something similar actually.
Mhm.
So I used to study during the day, and I think similar to you, Aubria, I enjoyed the fact that I had that seclusion. Nobody,
Mhm.
there wasn't any FOMO because everyone was inside their house. So I had the dedicated time to study, and then every night I would take maybe 30, 45, up to an hour walk, and I would call a different friend because then I studied like the 8 hours a day or whatever
Mhm.
that schedule was. And it was during summer for me when I was studying for the bar.
Mhm.
Nice enjoying the weather and also catching up with people, but the
Mhm.
new normal of like repicking back up the phone and calling people because you weren't going in person to see them.
Mhm.
Even if others were, I wanted to maintain my seclusion for the bar. So
Yeah.
I do relate to the walking. I think it personally really helped me just to get some fresh air.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
no, I actually remember I had a mentor at the law firm who would ask me if I took a walk today. When I was working at my first law firm, like she was like a mid-level associate. And I remember like she figured out that I was like kind of working 18 to 20 hours a day because my mindset was kind of like, what else am I gonna do anyway? I'm just letting you be a lawyer. Um, and so she would check in and kind of be like, bro, like, did you go for a walk? Like, did you eat? Like, when was the last time you ate? And so she held me accountable in that way, which I think was like really helpful because I can get really obsessive about things that like I really want to do and I'm really enjoying. And so, like, it was like, I feel like having that helped me actually develop better habits for when we like finally went back to the office like later on, because like what were the other, it's like if she didn't help me tighten it up, I don't think I
Mhm.
would have like, I mean, you guys know I had like a whole ritual on the weekends of what I do to, forget that I have, to forget that I had a big law job, right? And so like imagine like me working 7 days a week, for example, 20 hours. Like that's just that's just not healthy. Um, you know, but like I'm sure that there were people who were doing it. One thing I really loved though was also just being able to like zero in on my craft in a way that I would not have been able to if we were allowed to go anywhere. You know?
Um, I don't know if I agree with that in the same way, because like I wasn't thinking about it at the time, but I was very stressed during the COVID period. Like when you
Mm,
saw, like when you look, I look back at pictures on my
mm-hmm.
face, you see any stress. Like like only now, like I'm a TikTok observer, right? And so like they're trying to sell these cortisol teas or whatever, and they talk about like
The
cortisol
puffiness of your face.
like puffiness, acne, like just like eyes blurry, and I was just like, oh, whoa, going through it, bro. But like we had a lot going on at the time. Like it was a very
Mm-hmm.
dynamic period, personally and professionally, right? And like,
Yeah.
also it's just like there were so many demands from external stakeholders who are very accustomed to like having like personal touches because
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
they will always be there. That
Yeah.
they were kind of confused as well, and like you're in this awkward position where you're like and I think also for many junior people it's like this, right? Like you are a bottleneck of numerous forms of communication,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and to external stakeholders or even just non-team stakeholders, you are perceived as a knower, whereas
Mm-hmm.
you really are a relay or a telephone operator of sorts of
Mm-hmm.
information. And so like there's this lag between like a prompt and feedback for
Mm-hmm.
you and then for the other person. Everybody's upset, right? Because
Yeah.
you can just huddle up and be like, okay, this is what's going on, da 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 da, you know?
Yeah, I
And so,
mean, I think yes and no. I think it kind of depended on like what your team was like because like my first client, and I can actually say this out loud because it's public information, was Trinidad and Tobago.
uh,
And I was one of three attorneys on that matter. And I was the one running running the day-to-day operations of that deal. I was the one calling the Minister of Finance of Trinidad and Tobago asking him to verify numbers, right? And so
mm,
it's like to me, I think it really depended on who the junior person was,
mm,
where they were coming from, what they were willing to do, and I think that's a really important point that you made there because a lot of times when you're a junior and you're coming in, you're thinking, oh, I don't know anything, I don't really have the information, but some of the information you have from other experiences you've had, right? And so being willing to kind of take initiative as a new attorney is really important. I found that really helped me get more responsibilities. It certainly got me a year bump in my career, which is like completely unheard of. And so, like, I think, yes, like in some instances, you can end up being more of like you said, an operator, right? Um, or a dispatch, if you will. Whereas, or you can end up becoming like a key player, and it really just kind of depends on the place you're in. And so, like the first firm I worked at, there were lean teams. So for me, I'm like, that was a really lucky thing for me because then I got to really be in the thick of it and get substantive knowledge early enough so I can like be a smart attorney sooner. But sometimes you're on a team with like 20 people, right?
yeah,
And now they're like, oh, and you end up doing, signature pages, or blue booking for, to hit up, like for like 4 months, like that's all you're doing. So you're not really getting, the substantive work. And so, like, what were some of the things that you guys did like early on in your career to, kind of set yourself apart on your teams, depending on what you were doing earlier on? Because I know some of you are doing different things. Jamie.
Uh, right out of law school, I worked at a labor and employment law firm, like a small labor and employment law firm. And I was like the youngest. I was like the only a new-ish attorney there at the time, so there wasn't much of a team to stand in front of
Mm-hmm.
because
mm,
like everyone else had just been there for like years and years and years. But I mean, I tried to do like a good job, obviously, and
Mm-hmm.
would ask for feedback and uh, say I would offer myself for different opportunities. Be like, oh, I'd be willing to do that. Oh, is there any way I could be on that project or this
Mhm.
project? But yeah, so I really enjoyed that law firm. I just felt like since I was doing more like ERISA work, that
Mhm.
there was a better fit out there for me.
Mhm.
Mm.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, but the people there were great, and I had a really good experience there.
Yeah. And so Monica, I know you were up to something else early in your career too. So like tell us a little bit about the work you were doing then. As best as you can. And like what were some of the things you were doing as a newer attorney, to kind of set yourself apart, but also kind of build your skills, for the next thing that you wanted to do.
So I actually was a law clerk, so that was one of the benefits while during COVID while studying and all the uncertainty, I knew that I had a job secured.
Mm-hmm.
Gave me some peace of mind during the time period. And as a law clerk, I was actually in a unique position. My judge had just switched over from civil into criminal, so I got another unique experience on top of
Mm-hmm.
it, having a touch in both criminal and civil cases, which is
Mm-hmm.
unheard of. And it was really nice. So I was able to work very closely with the judge. He had a wealth of knowledge. I still keep in touch. He's a really, respectable man. Um, and it was really nice. I, volunteer or asked, not volunteer, or even sometimes without asking, I would write all the opinions first, just to have him look at it to really hone in on my legal writing
Mm-hmm.
ability. Or before, when any of the cases got sent to us, I would create something that now the law clerks still do. I would, create like a summary and and highlight the main facts and also why and a conclusion based on this right now.
Right.
And he found that helpful when he was approaching the bench. So I would create these little, it was a binder,
Mm-hmm.
but it became two of all the cases that were presented before him that given day. And then, a 1-page summary of my,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and I would also use that to back my legal research. So I would I've never heard of this before. And there's lots of things I hadn't heard of
Yeah.
or maybe hadn't, read about since law school. So
Mm-hmm.
it was a nice way to also do research,
Mm-hmm.
and convey that.
Yeah. No, that sounds like really cool. And so like I know for me, like I was so busy when I started out that any downtime I ended up having, I did a lot of like PLI, like CLE videos to learn about like other subject matter.
Mhm.
Because like being a deal attorney, like you end up kind of volleying between different departments. So like I worked with the ERISA people a lot. I worked with, like the litigation people a lot, especially like during diligence, tax people, like, and
Mhm.
so like just having like some familiarity with these other areas of law was helpful for me because like it just made me a better junior attorney because like once I was doing like initial review or something, I could suggest to a more senior attorney, hey, I think we might need the tax attorney because XYZ over here doesn't look right compared to the last, couple deals that we did. Like it looks like they changed something here, or we might need to get like the regulatory people on this because like I don't think these regulations look anything like what we did last time, but last time was like, I don't know, 15 years ago, and so like really like to me, like it was just like a good way to
Like
position
you spot.
myself. Yeah, like to like exactly issue spotting while also like positioning yourself as somebody who is actually paying attention to what's going on, and and not just kind of like waiting for somebody to tell you, could you look for this, could you look for that, because like part of being an attorney is like the practice of law, but you have to like take charge of your career as well, right? And so like Chris, I know you were clerking at the time as well, and I know you're an avid reader, as well as an avid writer. So like talk about like some of the things you were doing, during that time, like early stages to kind of really hone in your skills. Um, you know.
I think it's very interesting, like because it depends on where you deploy early in your career is really going to determine whether or not you
Mhm.
find your voice or you find any voice that you need to find for your principal, whoever your principal
Mhm.
is. Right? One of the big things for me was that I think feedback is hard to get that's actionable from people when you're actually in practice. You probably just see what the finished product looks like, or
Mhm.
like what the revisions they want, and they're going to really get into the strategic discussion of why certain revisions come to be how they are, or even
Mhm.
like sometimes like the tactical perspective of sometimes like shrouding certain things in a particular way, right? So I
Mhm.
think for two skills that I think are quite good are like being able to reverse engineer things,
Mhm.
and also to be able to do like your own form of knowledge management.
Mhm.
Yeah, like being able to like quickly access information as you need it, or also be able to
Mhm.
like see how things have changed from what you would initially thought, and like
Mhm.
get to the why without someone else having to tell you, because sometimes they're not able to tell you. Even though I also think it's important to ask for whys when there's an
Right.
opportunity, you know. So I thought about that a lot, especially considering that you'd have very different types of cases coming before you. Like, a lot of I have this nice little thing, a little pet idea I keep in my mind, just that at the end of the day, all litigation becomes an insurance claim,
Mhm.
right? And like being able to see, like you're taught in school about these are the structures of law and why precedents are important, but precedents are really important because they give people realistic understanding, so like how they can price risk, right?
Right.
So like
Right.
like this contract is enforceable for these reasons. Okay, so if we do it like this, we'll be able to protect it, and therefore we probably get a summary judgment. We won't have to go to trial. Or
Mhm.
an injury of this type is this expensive, so therefore we should take these types of protective measures. I mean, able to
Mhm.
see that and like see the current of the authorities that you have to follow, something that really is going to transform how you approach a lot of your work, right?
Yeah. Yeah. No, that totally makes sense. I mean, I think that also like comes into play too with even like, managing the different people that you're working with, whether you're managing down and, maybe working with people in different departments that are either helping you like put binders together if you're in litigation, or, helping you format a document because like it got haywire because somebody like decided to run it through some program. The somebody being me. I know that was a very specific
Mm.
example.
Yeesh.
Um, you know, um, but also even managing like paralegals and being aware of like you like as an attorney, you can't really pass the buck to anybody else. You have to be aware of what you're supposed to be kind of like looking for, like all of the issues, like any piece of data that you need to get to the finish line, whether it's for litigation or a deal, like making sure you have every piece of the puzzle down. And so like I know for me, like we did a lot of like closing checklists for our deals, but like what do you do in litigation? Like do you have that same kind of like checklist type thing, or is there like something else that you do for that? Did you guys ever have to do checklists in your like if you're doing like a case, like what are certain things you have to do? I'm not a litigator, so I'm asking.
I mean, I could talk about it, but I don't know. I want to get a sense from everybody else, like what was like how they've approached it in the past.
Yeah. All right, Monica, you go.
My work wasn't I mean in the court system I would say that's litigation, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I would say mostly what I dealt with was criminal. So really looking at the statute and seeing what happened here, what are the facts, and matching the facts to each of the given standards. And if there is
Right.
a gray area, then looking for precedent.
Mm-hmm.
Not trying to create something new, trying to be fair and just. And at
Mm-hmm.
the end of the day, that's really important.
Mm-hmm.
Trying to, you know, we're not trying to make things up.
Yeah.
So whatever the judge is saying was backed by something.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say that was something that I would try to help with. And then as for a checklist,
Mm-hmm.
I would say I'm besides following the statute because the statutes aren't very long.
Right.
At least the ones that I was mainly dealing with. I would also I created almost like a binder, I would say, of different codes that I felt like were repeating. That way the next
Mm-hmm.
one could use it for their, area. So kind of
Yeah.
a little summary
Mm-hmm.
of like whereas clause or just a little description. So not a checklist exactly, but that's what I ended up
So
doing.
almost like a cheat sheet, even of like
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
like I know people don't like the term cheat sheet, but like that's what it is.
Yeah. Summary
uh,
page, like, kind of
yeah.
really to help yourself. One,
Mhm.
it was good practice for me. Two, I'm sure it was useful for.
Mhm. Yeah, no, for sure. And so Jamie, like what we're like I'm really interested in like how you kept organized as the only junior person at the
Mm.
ERISA firm that you were working at. Like what like were there like certain like types of like checklists you had to, use to manage that? Like how do you kind of like manage up in those situations?
Yeah, they were really good at not like overwhelming me with stuff, because they kind of understood that I was very new to the role and Ursus is pretty complicated. So there was
Mhm.
me, then there was a more senior attorney, and then there was like the head of the ERISA department, which consisted of us three. Um, and uh, yeah, it was basically like the more senior person often would try to teach me the ways, and like I would definitely take notes and like even like really simple down to like basic stuff like the difference between like a defined benefit and defined contribution plan to like
Yeah.
more detailed stuff about dealing
Mhm.
with like I remember I had to do like what is it? Qualified has to do with divorces
Mhm.
and separate and like divvying up the pension
Okay.
and things.
Okay. So how would you compare that to your work that you're doing in like subrogation now? Like what are like some of the things like just kind of like at a high level, like what sort of things do you kind of have to look out for when you're working, to settle a certain claim?
Um, I think it's just like a lot of following up with people and just like persistence and just like it's a lot more actually talking to people, whereas
Mhm.
with my work at the other law firm, it was just kind of almost like I was like really more like reading statutes and stuff and like trying to and like much more like behind the scenes in a way.
Okay. Okay. Whereas this you're kind of like actually
More of a
talking to.
front
Big
Okay.
end, yeah,
gives an energy.
yeah.
Yeah.
I actually wanted to talk about that more because I feel like a lot of people there's a dynamic that happens in I don't know if it happens in other schools, but specifically in law schools where people feel like there is a snippiness or like a sharpness that is like can be beneficial, but it's like short sighted
Mhm.
because I feel like all right, for instance, right, give or take, we may not have interacted as a group in 5 years, but we interacting now, right? And we're in very
Mhm.
different places now. And
Mhm.
let's say we interact in like 2 years again. We're gonna be in different places again.
Mhm. Mhm.
And we
Mhm.
may have reason to interact in a professional capacity again.
Right.
And I think that like if someone had left a very awkward, made an awkward situation or left a very sour note in someone's tongue, like 3 years ago, or even to someone we knew, like we
Mhm.
were more regularly in touch with, is gonna tinge the way in which we're gonna deal with each other
Mhm.
because now we're gonna have to be more, I guess, stilted in
Mhm.
communication.
Mhm.
And I feel
Yeah.
like the negotiating and public perceptive aspect of this profession is underplayed, right?
Mhm.
Like I mean, like
Mhm.
when everybody I've met who's been very talented or gotten ahead really like very far in the profession, they've
Mhm.
been exceptionally talented at like the etiquette and like I guess bedside manner component of this job, and I
Mhm.
think it's
Mhm.
an understood part of the practice.
My
Yeah.
professor in law school had actually told us that my first summer of law school. He's like, even how you study with people is going to impact you. He's like, your reputation starts now. He's like, you're going to see the people that cut corners and you're not going to want to recommend them. Or you're going
Mhm.
to see the people that are diligent, that ask questions, that are polite, and you're going to want to recommend them to your friends and family. Or if you have personal work that you need in an area that's not your expertise.
Mhm.
And I do think that people aspect is very important, like Chris is mentioning. At the end of the day, you are people, and sometimes the best way to end a deal that I've personally found is like sometimes not even picking up the phone. Like I would walk up the floor at different floors when I was at, in the bank industry, and I'd be like, hey, like we need to talk about this face to face, and people would take, would have that
Mhm.
conversation with me because they knew that I wanted to help them and I wanted to finish. But I had other colleagues of mine that maybe didn't have that same rapport with others,
Mhm.
and they couldn't just walk in, or they couldn't pick up the phone. Their calls were not getting answered.
Right.
And and that definitely hindered their timelines for
Mhm.
reports. So I do think that just being a human and being receptive, one, either to feedback, or two, to just communicating and trying to find that middle ground,
Mhm.
if there is middle ground to be found,
Yeah.
is very important, and I would second that. And as
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
life motto in general.
I
No,
really
I definitely agree with that. I mean, like a rumor that was started is that people who started their careers in law in the pandemic, like in 2020 and 2021, aren't as skilled as people who started before them or after them because of the remote nature of their work. And a lot of the argumentation there is, well, they weren't having that face-to-face interaction and mentorship and all of that. Like, I don't know if you guys have seen that, but I've seen, tinges
I
of that being kind of like, kind of all over, right? But when I started, I was just picking up the phone and calling
Mhm.
people because I met a lot of those people during my summer. In fact, like I had no choice but to call people and be like, "Hey, I don't like I can't read your I can't read this. I can't read this, markup because like it just trails off." And like being like, "Can you go to like, 5 lines up on page 25?" Like, and really like kind of being willing to do that, and I think that's something that like even if you're in the office, you have to do that. Like you can be physically in the office and still miss those opportunities as well. And like just being an initiator, like not always waiting for people to notice you, like noticing people, right? So like if you see an announcement about a partner in your group, getting an award or, you know, whatever, like reaching out and being like, "Oh my god, like congratulations," or whatever, just so like people know that like you care about them on a human level, and it's not just about, what can I get from you, like,
Mhm.
or I'm just here for the check or whatever. I think that like relationship building is really important, because again, like you just never know. And like I always use this story with my mom, like I remember when I was a kid, like we went in, I think we went to like the Jeep dealer or something. She wanted like a new Jeep, and she wanted to pay, like she showed up with the cash, in her bag, you know, just like that. And but they were trying, I remember they were trying to give her a loan, and she was like, "Oh no, I don't need a loan. Like, what is it? Like, what is the final price?" Like, and they thought she was joking because like she showed up in like pajamas. Like she didn't show up looking like
just
she had
to show off.
$35,000 in her pocket, and so they treated her, middle-aged black woman, like what, they treated her like she didn't have, like she wasn't important, right? And it wasn't until they saw that cash their tune changed, right? And so to me it's like, I think a lot of times we kind of give a lot of clout to people based on other people noticing them, and we tend to alienate people because we're like, "Oh, that person's not important, I don't have to take note of them." But
Mhm.
the unimportant person can become very important in one fell swoop, and so I always tell people, if you're not just going to do it out of common decency, do it, because you never know if you're going to need that person later, you know um and like maybe that doesn't sound good, but but it's real. Like, and I think like a lot of times people get so caught up in, "Oh, but this is how I feel," and it's like, it doesn't matter how you feel. Like if you're mean to people and you might need them later, they might not be kind later, right? and that's just kind of the bottom line. And a lot of times, I'll give another example. A couple years ago, I got a random call from this agency that was asking about, what were they asking about? They were asking me about different people. They had a list of names, and they were like, "Oh, do you know this person?" And I was like, "No, I don't know this person." And then immediately I figured out like they really wanted me to give them information about 3 people on their list of 10 people that I actually worked with. And they were partners at firms that I worked at. And they were looking at them for other roles and they wanted to know what my experience was with them. I was not a senior attorney. I was like a second or third year attorney when I got those calls, right? And so like imagine a little second or third year attorney can have impact on your ability to get a job at a new place because of how you treated them, right?
Yeah, I mean, to the extent that you're making that point, I mean, especially it's kind of funny, right? Especially here, this is a place where you can really go exponentially high, right? Like you
Mhm.
could end up in like, crucial, secret, classified business.
Mhm.
And they're gonna ask about all kinds of other things because they're gonna be like curious as to whether or not you could be a public relations liability. And like I think that in the idea that you could be someone who's like quick to make a faux pas, that
Mhm.
could be a big problem.
Yeah.
And but what I wanted to talk about, because what you were talking about was like very interesting to me, is that
Mhm.
we try to get to agreement, but we frequently deal in disagreement, right?
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
how you convey the nature of like, all right, we agree up to this point, but from here to here we disagree. How do
Yeah.
you get that off without getting into like the heated discussion or back and forth? You know what I mean? Like as
Mhm.
I've seen it go well and I've seen it go poorly. And I just want to get like your views on that.
Yeah, I mean, for me, like, I think it depends on what the thing is, right? Like, is it a sexual harassment situation?
Nah, I mean like it's like work.
Or
Like, it's
or
like
is it
work.
like or is it just work, right?
Yeah.
And again, like even with the work thing, like there have been like sexual harassment cases from a work thing that didn't look like sexual harassment until you figured out, well, this person is just really abrasive to the women colleagues as compared to the male colleagues that they work with, right? And so like that's something to be aware of, but also I think, I think also the other thing that you kind of need to like think about is, first of all, what level are you? Like, are you somebody who's on equal footing with an individual, or are you somebody who is senior, or are you somebody who's junior? Like, I think you just kind of have to think about the hierarchy. I know that like it's not quote unquote cool to think of hierarchies, but like let's be honest, there are hierarchies. And so like when I'm a junior person talking to somebody who wants to who essentially wants to be a part, right? Like be a part of this conversation that I'm having, and like I'm the junior. Like I have to come correct. Like I just have to come from a place of respect, right? And so I can disagree, but I also have to defer, you know, especially when it's a matter of like style versus substance, right? And so like you kind of have to decide, like, is this a substance argument or is this a style argument, right? But even on a deeper level, like if I'm having a dispute with you and it's related to like an actual assignment, like why is there even a dispute? Right? And so like I'll give an example. Like I remember I was working on a deal with somebody who she was she was actually really awesome. Um, as like a partner, like when I look at, like, she's always in my head. So this woman, like, she was like a teaching partner. And so I remember she would like, but she was the type that would call you, that would literally call you, no matter what time of night, to give you that feedback. And so, like, in the pandemic, like during the lockdowns, I created a monster because it was all gravy, baby. But
Yeah, because you were always available. Yes, yes,
but
yes.
then
Yeah.
but then when it wasn't the lockdowns anymore and we could go outside, it was not gravy. Because I was like, you can't be calling me at like 12 o'clock at night because, like, I got stuff to do tomorrow. But I couldn't say that to her. So what I would say is, either one, I'd say, hey, thank you so much for like reaching out. Like, I'd like email, hey, now's not a very good time, and just kind of leave it like that, and deal with it in the morning, kind of thing.
Mm.
But or my favorite dispute is when three people need you to be in three different locations, right? And so, like, how do you handle that? Whether you're senior or junior, or even on equal footing, like, how do you handle that? And I remember times where I was like, okay, um, this is what I'm working on. This was my favorite thing to do. This is what I'm working on right now. This is when it's due. When is your stuff due, kind of thing, right?
Yeah,
And
I
kind
think
of like do it that way.
it
And for
level sets it
me,
for
yeah,
everybody. It makes it transparent and it gives everybody a chance to like save face quickly.
exactly,
But
exactly. And
like,
Oh
yeah,
no.
anyway,
Facts. So sorry about that. My hands are like a little clammy and I slipped. I'm so
no
sorry.
worries. So Chris, like, what were you saying?
yeah, I'm saying like, I like that. Like it, how to put it? A lot of times I find that it's a situation where people need a chance to save face or to be
Mm-hmm.
able to have the opportunity to, I guess, to appear magnanimous in a situation, right? Like,
Yeah,
for
yeah.
instance, like they need
What does
they need,
magnanimous mean? We talking to regular people, Chris. I told you about your linguistic abilities. We ain't trying to deal with that.
yeah, I mean, it's just like to look like, like somebody who's like kind and gracious in the moment, right? Like they just like, they have that that effect, and like, they deadly need this break from you, and you're like, oh well,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you need it, but I'd be willing to help you. And they're like, well, yes, I don't mind giving you this break. They desperately need that, like, especially like these things like in Germans, you'll find that like being able to give people that optic
Mm-hmm.
W is just like is helpful to everyone.
Yeah. And so, Monica, have you had situations where you had to kind of stand off with somebody about something on the job? I don't know. I feel like I have like very, like, in my mind, like, you're like an angelic being who like never has disputes, but like no pressure to say that you do or don't. But so, but like, as I was
Sweet of you.
asking the question, I was like, wait, like, I feel like Monica is very like amicable and amenable, like, which is good vibes to have people think about you just as a general.
Exactly.
you know.
Oh, thank you for your kind words. No, I definitely have had disputes. I think I don't like to get worked up. I think most things are not a matter of life and death. But that doesn't mean they're not very serious matters and you need to, urgently deal with them. But I think when you're able to think clearly, I think that's when you're able to shine. And I find that so far in my career, that's what's helped me. Not saying I don't take things, with urgency, but I have that calm, level headed that I really try to maintain, just because I feel like I do my best thinking that way. So yeah, oftentimes we may disagree. I might be right or I might be wrong. And I think that's why I really value a conversation in those times, whether we're on the same side or not. Sometimes just simply level setting, I think, gets you halfway there, or maybe three-quarters of the way there, because it's kind of what Chris was alluding to earlier. Like, we agree up until this point, and sometimes figuring out where that point is essential to solving the problem. And in my experience, getting to that point has been really helpful. So then I explain, like, this is why I think what I think, and then letting the other person maybe, save face
Yeah.
by having them come around to my side. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes that doesn't always work, but that is approach I like to
Mm-hmm.
use first before I try a different way.
Yeah, no, I think that's really important. It's funny, as we were talking, I actually remembered like a very specific dispute that I had on, like, it was like a mega deal that I was running. It was like we called it what do we call it? Like Australia, or so. It was like a weird name that we gave to the deal. Arizona. It was Arizona. And Project Arizona. And that deal, it was something like 30 jurisdictions, I think like 15 time zones. It was like a stupid deal. And like a Thursday evening, I had a call with opposing counsel. And like when I was on the call, I was in a position to make a deal. But opposing counsel was not in a position to make a deal.
I think
And
that's also important to note. Like, who are you talking to? Are you
yeah,
talking to the
but
person
they get,
Who has like binding authority is
yeah,
key on the call. And
yeah,
like sometimes I don't particularly enjoy um like if I have a work obligation like connection, I don't like not having an agenda, and I
mm-hmm,
don't like if we don't leave the call with that answer, because
mm-hmm,
some of them are just meetings where we need to convey certain information
yeah,
like to prelude whatever the written record is going to be,
mm-hmm,
like,
mm-hmm,
give people context.
yeah,
But like it's weird sometimes when you feel like, oh, we're gonna like this is a slam dunk. It's like, oh no, this is a pass. Okay, great, thanks.
no, for real. And so, like, Jamie, have you like been in situations where, especially in like your new role, where like you're talking to people who may not be in a position to like make a settlement or whatever? Like, how do you handle that? Like, how do you handle those calls, especially when they're not transparent about their lack of ability to make those decisions? Because that was my issue
Usually
with that
people are
person.
pretty transparent about it, and like when I first started, I didn't really have authority to
Mm-hmm.
accept anything other than like 100% or
Mm-hmm.
like demand anything. So it was kind of easy in a lot of ways. I could just be like, oh, like thanks for the offer. I'll bring it back to like lead counsel and I'll let you know.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't mind when people aren't like, if even just like talking and like getting an offer on the table is always a good thing. So
Yeah. It's funny because I feel like at the firm, like especially that particular deal, like we had like an hour-long conversation, me and this person. We had an agreement, and then I went to sleep and woke up at 4 a.m. like the following day, and just bad habits were in play here, because I had forgotten to like put my work phone in my home office, and so I checked the work phone on my way to the bathroom, and I see this email saying the opposite of what the agreement is, going to like my local council in I think in like the Philippines or something. So like basically nobody expected anybody in New York to be awake when that email was sent. And so it was one of those things where I had to act quickly, because it was going to completely shift the deal documents that we were working on, and it was going to be an adverse result for my client. And so I remember sending an email, where I was just kind of like, hey, like, this is not what we talked about. Um, and just so you know, like, we talked about closing in 4 days, and here are the open points. Like this thing that you're trying to fiddle with is a settled point. Here are the open points that we need to settle. So can you sort that out? Thank you, my name. And then I went back to sleep. Like I wrote that email and went back to sleep. And then I woke up, I think like 7:30 a.m. later and was like, wait, did you send an email?
Mm.
And so it was like, I always tell people, like, this is how you know when you really know what you're doing, because it was one of the first emails in a long time that I had absolutely no typos. I'm like the typo queen. I'm sorry. And it's because I feel like, you know, you can always fix a typo. Like you can't fix substance. Like if the substance is wrong, it's wrong. And I've never made a substantive typo. So there's that. And so like and so when I sent that email,
Mhm.
like I hadn't proofread it. And that's faux pas when you're sending stuff to opposing counsel. Really, you're not supposed to send an email
Mm.
that you didn't. But I remember, so I was nervous before I read the email, before I like when I realized, oh no, you wrote this email. I remember I checked and I was like, oh, that was a very professional email that you wrote with sleep in your eyes, well articulated. And I think I missed like a period or something. Like that was my typo that time, but because people didn't like the content of the email, because in that particular situation, they copied the whole universe because they were trying to clamp down. And now the whole universe saw that they were wrong.
I feel like you just give us some law there, girl. Like some Aubria law there.
So, what are your Christopher thoughts?
I have views. I have views. One is that it some people did not eject into professional adult life until after law school. And yes, there was like, so for some people you saw there was like a period to get acquainted with um some people were always very gifted children. They were very smart all the time and thing, and they therefore they had this feeling like they could wow people, right? And my brother has a thing he says all the time. He's like, you feel like you can fool people. You can fool some people sometimes, you got people all the time. But it's like
Yeah.
when you think you're fooling somebody, you're really fooling yourself, right?
Mhm.
And like
Mhm.
there's this growing up period you have to get to where, things may happen that may not be ideal, but your
Mhm.
ability to course correct or like to come up and be like, hey, this didn't happen properly or whatever, but like I want to
Mhm.
fix it. It's like a lot better than like she didn't see. Let's just cover this up real or
Mhm.
like
Mhm.
say
Mhm.
nothing or whatever. Because it's always like I find with this practice, is Murphy's law is like
Yeah.
running in the background right through us. So like every time you feel like that's not gonna happen, guess what? It's coming down the pipe. I
Everything's gonna happen.
yeah, no, you know what I mean. And so to the extent that you could feel strongly about how you behave or perform, how do you deal with the fact that like sometimes you fall short, and how do you address that? Especially somebody who, you have a lot to lose reputationally as the youngest or
Mhm.
junior person in the room now.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I think like when I was like brand new as an attorney, like I kind of went in with the mindset like I'm here to learn, and that was like the common thread. So even if I didn't agree with feedback, I would never say, "Oh, you're wrong." I would ask for examples. And so like when and for me, like I have a whole action plan. We're probably gonna go over a few minutes. If anybody needs to like drop off, just don't leave me here by myself, guys.
Mm.
um But if anybody needs to drop off at 8, feel free. Um, but you know, for me, what was really important was learning my craft, getting into the practice, because this was a third career for me. And it was also like my lifelong dream. And so ultimately, like the goal here was anything that I can do, anything that I can do to make my experience easier, as well as the people that I'm working with easier. Like that was my goal going in. So like I was never the type where I felt like I didn't have a chip on my shoulder, like you can't give me feedback. But if I already knew off the bat, and I've written about this too, like if if I knew off the bat that like you were just being an op, like I would ask you point blank. Thanks for bringing that to my attention. Could you provide one example of like when this happened so I can kind of see what you mean? And you see, like if you do it that way, it doesn't look like pushback. It looks like you're actually trying to learn. And so in that instance, like, you know, 99% of the time when I'm asking for an example, it's because I know you don't have any.
Yeah.
you know but
I've
if
been
but if you're spot on, like if you've criticized something about me, and like because I know myself more than anybody else can know me, like I just do. And so like if you tell me, oh, like you were sloppy because of typos, I'd be like, yeah, I'm really working on that. Like I'm trying my best. Like my eyes weren't working because I worked 80
tired.
hours. I was
Yeah.
working 80 hours this week. So you told me you needed it right away. I figured I'd have a second look because it's midnight. The client's not looking at it at midnight. And so like to me, like and so like if I was in the wrong, I already know I'm in the wrong. I don't need examples, right? But and so it's more kind of like, oh, thank you for bringing that to my attention. Like, I'll
One
make
minute
sure
now.
that never happens again. And
Mm.
like that was my vibe. Like, and once I told you, I'll make sure. I never said that about typos because I couldn't make that promise. But but everything else, it just never happened again. And so people could look at me and say, oh wow, like she has integrity because she actually like never did that one thing that I told her about. Like like you never had to talk to me about the same thing twice, kind of thing.
Mm.
And that's kind of how I was as a kid too. Like there, I was not a repeat offender. Did I have many offenses? Maybe, but I was never a repeat offender as a kid.
Exploring boundaries is one thing, right? But I was gonna ask if y'all ever saw that show, The Bear. I think I saw it was one of my wife was like going crazy on her, and she was for a period of time.
Mm,
There's this episode where the protagonist, whoever the bear is, he
mm-hmm,
went to a former workplace he had because it was shutting down,
mm-hmm.
and there was this guy who was a chef that trained him, but it was like terrible to him, like very like harsh taskmaster.
Mhm, mhm.
And the bear confronts the taskmaster, and the taskmaster's like, "Yeah, I'm your up, and I don't really like care that I was bad to you, because guess what? You got good, you got really good. So you
Mhm.
should be happy that I was there." And
That sounds like a West Indian parent, bro.
very, and it's something that I really thought about in that it takes all kinds, and some people gonna
Mhm.
push the wind beneath your wings, and some
Mhm.
people gonna be like, flapping hard enough. You know what I mean? Like you sort
Yeah.
of, you gotta be able to take the fruits out
Mhm.
of each interaction and be able to move forward with it.
Yeah.
Like dealing in a very fractious environment, like where people come to us because they need to, not because they want to, and they don't. And as a result, like we need to really be able to take, like really extract the most juice out of whatever we get. And I mean, like, I don't know,
Mhm.
Mark, but like I didn't really hear much from you on that point. I also think you worked in financial services, like from the client side. So like, I want to know like how that experience was in comparison.
Mon, that's for you.
Oh, apologies. No, I thought it was for the client side. I was like, wait, what? So I don't deal with my clients are more internal clients.
Mm,
So sorry, that's why I wasn't sure the question was directed to me.
Remind
So
me, were you doing compliance there?
yeah.
I can't. Yeah.
Mhm.
So
So
like.
my clients were investment bankers, I would
Mhm.
say, or other banks or other entities.
got
Mhm.
you.
So really, it was really more internal work
Mhm.
that were my clients, and obviously lots of contention there when money is involved, and
Mhm.
you know, the mood of the stock market definitely does determine the mood of the trader. Um, but in general, I think it's just really, I think coming back to that, like, what's the goal here? I think that really, because sometimes people,
Yeah.
what they're saying isn't really what they're asking, and you have to
Yeah.
dig through that. So I found that to be helpful. Like what? Okay, you're saying all this stuff, but what are you really getting to?
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, so that's something I definitely felt was something I had to practice to get better at listening for the real question.
Yeah. No, I think that's really important, Monica. And like, really, like, I also like what you said about like your clients being internal, because a lot of times people think because they're not dealing with like the external client, like they're not client facing. But in every step of your role as an attorney, you are client facing, you know?
Yeah.
Like no matter who you're talking to, like there's so, we talked about stakeholders, towards the beginning of this, like you just never, to me it's like, even talking to your assistant, like we didn't even get into that, like if you have an assistant, like how are you treating your assistant, how are you treating the support staff in the courts, like everything matters, because like how are you dealing with like the printing department, like are you pissing people off that you're
Yeah.
gonna
That's
need to
that's a
to
thing that because
to
that
to help you,
deep.
I really just want to like end on that, like, the support staff, right? Like there's so many people in all of these spaces that are working to make everything run like a well-oiled machine, right? And so it's like, if I'm in the judge's chambers, right? Like, yes, the judge is the most important person in the room, but rest assured, whoever you need to make sure that opinions like pinned up and filed where it needs to be filed. I don't know if I'm using the right words here, so correct me.
It
You
doesn't
know,
matter because like
but
it's
Being a good
something.
person.
yeah, just
I
like,
think short and sweet, honestly, like summing up what
yeah,
you're saying, right? It's like being a good person. Like
yeah,
your reputation matters to the big and to the small.
mm-hmm,
Being courteous, like a smile or a friendly, acknowledgement of someone will never hurt you. Um,
yeah,
so I think that's kind of hearing both of you what you're saying, and I think that's
yeah,
essential to life outside the
yeah,
legal field and in the legal field.
yeah, and really like just be like, remember that, like, I think Monica was the one who said this, it's not life and death. Like, we're not doctors. you
Exactly.
know we're not, like, and like, yes, maybe in criminal court in a murder case, but like if you do your job, like, to me it's like, if you're doing your job correctly along the way and you make one mistake and you're able to catch that mistake, or like, you don't, like, to me, like, why are we blowing up about the mistake happening instead of fixing the mistake, right? And I think that's important for like younger attorneys to know too. But I just want to thank you guys for coming. I know that this was a sacrifice for everyone that was here. Thank you, Jamie. I know you had to run, but I'm so glad that you guys were able to come by and just talk about your experiences. I hope this was helpful to people. Please let us know in the comments